History remembers kings for their crowns, their armies, and the size of their empires. But conquest alone does not make a ruler great. Some kings changed law, others changed language, government, culture, or the way enormous territories could be ruled. So we ranked 7 rulers using 5 tests: power, governance, cultural legacy, durability, and global influence. This is not a list of the kindest kings, and it is not a celebration of everything they did. It is a comparison of historical impact. At number 7, we begin inside the most famous palace on Earth. What if a palace was not just a home, but a machine designed to control an entire kingdom? Louis XIV became King of France as a child and remained on the throne for 72 years. But his greatest display of power was not a battlefield, it was Versailles. Beginning in the 17th century, Louis transformed a royal hunting lodge into a gigantic political stage. In 1682, he moved the court and government there. France's greatest nobles were drawn into a world of ceremonies, privileges, and competition for access to the king. The palace made one message impossible to ignore: political life revolved around Louis. His government became more centralized. Ministers reorganized administration and finance. Manufacturing expanded, and French art, fashion, theater, architecture, and diplomacy shaped elite culture across Europe. Even the gardens projected authority. Their symmetry presented nature itself as something ordered by royal power. Court life also changed the nobles themselves. To gain influence, they had to spend time and money near the king, following rules Louis could observe and reward. But the brilliance had a cost. Louis fought repeated wars that placed heavy pressure on France. In 1685, he revoked protections for French Protestants. Many were forced to convert, and more than 200,000 fled, taking skills and businesses with them. That contradiction defines him. Louis XIV made France the cultural and political center of his age, but his system depended on concentration of power, expensive conflict, and religious intolerance. He ranks 7th because his image of monarchy influenced Europe for generations, while the burdens of his reign limited the durability of his achievement. Versailles survived as a monument to royal power, and later became the setting where that kind of power would be challenged. One journey made the world look at West Africa differently. Mansa Musa ruled the Mali Empire in the 14th century. His title, Mansa, can be translated as king or emperor. Mali controlled important routes connecting gold-producing regions south of the Sahara with the commercial cities of North Africa. In 1324, Musa began a pilgrimage to Mecca. He traveled with a vast royal procession and distributed so much gold along the route that later writers described major economic disruption in Cairo. The exact size of his fortune cannot be converted honestly into modern dollars. Calling him the richest person ever is a powerful headline, not a calculation historians can prove. But the real story is larger than wealth. The pilgrimage announced Mali as a major state to the wider Mediterranean world. Within years, European mapmakers pictured Musa holding gold in West Africa. After returning, he sponsored mosques and monumental building projects associated with cities such as Timbuktu and Gao. Mali became famous not only for trade, but also for scholarship and Islamic learning. Gold financed visibility, but institutions gave that visibility a longer life. Buildings, teachers, books, and commercial connections mattered more than a single spectacular procession. His reign reveals a world often missing from popular history. A sophisticated African empire connected to long-distance commerce, diplomacy, religion, architecture, and knowledge. There is also a warning in the famous image of Musa holding a gold nugget. European maps turned a complex ruler into a symbol of endless treasure. If we remember only the gold, we repeat that simplification. Mansa Musa ranks 6th because his pilgrimage changed how distant societies imagined West Africa, while his patronage strengthened Mali's cultural reputation. His empire did not endure forever, but the names Mali and Timbuktu still carry the memory of a powerful intellectual and commercial civilization. Most kings built monuments from stone. Sejong built one from sound. When Sejong became the fourth king of Korea's Joseon dynasty in 1418, official writing depended heavily on classical Chinese. It was prestigious, but difficult for ordinary Korean speakers to master. That meant access to written communication remained limited. Sejong supported scholars, scientific work, agriculture, astronomy, music, medicine, and more accurate systems of measurement. Yet his most enduring project was a new writing system designed for the Korean language. Completed in 1443 and publicly explained in 1446, Hunminjeongeum, the correct sounds for the instruction of the people, introduced letters shaped around clear principles. Today, the system is known as Hangul. The idea was radical because writing is power. A script that is easier to learn can widen access to information and allow a language to be recorded more directly. Not every elite welcomed the change. Some officials feared that abandoning established literary conventions would weaken their connection to Chinese learning and reduce the status that difficult writing helped preserve. The new alphabet survived that resistance. Centuries later, Hangul became a central part of Korean identity and literacy. UNESCO now preserves the explanatory manuscript in its memory of the World Register, and an International Literacy Prize carries Sejong's name. Its letters were systematic enough to represent Korean sounds clearly, making the script both visually distinctive and unusually teachable compared with the older written system. Sejong ranks fifth because his greatest legacy was not territory. It was a tool people could keep using after his armies, policies, and buildings disappeared. Conquerors can redraw a border for a generation. A writing system can shape how millions of people learn, think, record stories, and speak to the future. Sejong's monument is still used every day. Nearly 4,000 years ago, a king made law part of his public image and carved that image into stone. Hammurabi ruled Babylon in the 18th century BCE. At the beginning of his reign, Babylon was only one power among several competing states in Mesopotamia. Through diplomacy, alliances, military campaigns, and careful administration, he transformed it into the center of a much larger kingdom. His most famous monument is the tall stone stele commonly called the Code of Hammurabi. Near its top, the king stands before Shamash, a god associated with justice. Below them are hundreds of legal decisions covering property, trade, wages, family life, professional responsibility, and punishment. It was not the first law code in history, and it did not create equality before the law. Penalties could change according to social status, and many rules reflect a harsh and unequal society. The stele was also royal messaging. Hammurabi presented himself as the ruler chosen to establish order and protect his kingdom. That is exactly why the monument matters. The decisions also reveal everyday Babylonian concerns: loans, damaged property, commercial disputes, marriage arrangements, and the duties expected from different professions. It shows a government trying to define expectation across a growing state. Law was not only a private decision made inside the palace. It could be organized, recorded, displayed, and connected to the legitimacy of the king. Hammurabi ranks fourth because his kingdom did not remain united for centuries after his death, but the idea attached to his name endured. Rulers should be judged not only by conquest, but by the order they claim to create. His stone does not prove that Babylon was fair by modern standards. It proves that almost 4 millennia ago, written law had already become one of the strongest symbols of political power. Centuries after the Western Roman Empire collapsed, one king tried to assemble its fragments into something new. Charlemagne became king of the Franks in 768. Through decades of warfare, alliances, and religious expansion, He brought a vast part of Western and Central Europe under his authority. In the year 800, Pope Leo III crowned him emperor in Rome. The title was dramatic, but territory alone does not explain his influence. Charlemagne governed through counts, royal envoys, assemblies, and written orders intended to connect distant regions to the court. His system was imperfect and depended heavily on personal loyalty, yet it attempted to create common standards across a huge and diverse realm. He also gathered scholars from different parts of Europe. Schools and scriptoria produced and copied books. A clearer style of handwriting, Carolingian minuscule, made texts easier to reproduce and read. Ancient and Christian works survived in part because generations of scribes copied them during this cultural revival. At Aachen, architecture, ritual, learning, and royal authority were combined into a new imperial center. Charlemagne was presenting himself not as a simple successor to Rome, but as the ruler of a revived Christian empire in the West. This revival did not mean that everyone suddenly became educated. It meant the court made accurate books and trained administrators a political priority. The weakness appeared after his death. His empire was eventually divided among his heirs, proving that one powerful ruler had not created a permanently unified Europe. Charlemagne ranks third because the political map fractured, but the institutions, educational reforms, imperial idea, and cultural revival outlived him. Later rulers repeatedly claimed his legacy. He did not restore ancient Rome. He created a new model of European kingship from its memory, and that model shaped the Middle Ages. By the age of 30, Alexander controlled an empire stretching from Greece and Egypt deep into Asia. Then, almost as quickly as it appeared, his united empire vanished. Alexander became king of Macedon in 336 BCE. He inherited a formidable army and a plan to invade the Persian Empire. What followed was one of history's most extraordinary sequences of campaigns. Persian royal centers fell, Egypt accepted him as ruler, and his forces continued east towards Central Asia and the Indus Valley. His speed created the legend, but his legacy came from movement. Soldiers, administrators, merchants, artists, and ideas traveled across enormous distances. New cities and royal courts connected Greek traditions with Egyptian, Persian, Mesopotamian, and Central Asian cultures. After Alexander died in 323 BCE, his generals divided the territories among themselves. The single empire did not survive, and decades of rivalry followed. That is the central contradiction of his reign. He was brilliant at expansion, but never had enough time to build a stable succession. Yet the fragmentation produced the Hellenistic world. Kingdoms formed from his conquests supported new centers of trade, science, art, and cultural exchange. Greek language and institutions spread far beyond Greece, while Greek culture itself changed through contact with older civilizations. Cities such as Alexandria became symbols of this new network, places where royal ambition, commerce, scholarship, and traditions from several regions met. Alexander ranks second because few rulers transformed the map so quickly or influenced such a vast cultural zone. But conquest and durability are different achievements. He won an empire. He did not secure its future. That is why the greatest king on this list is not the man who advanced the farthest. It is the ruler who paired conquest with a governing model that others could inherit. The strongest empire is not always the one that conquers the most. Sometimes it is the one that learns how to rule difference. Cyrus the Great founded the Achaemenid Persian Empire in the 6th century BCE. He defeated powerful rivals and united territories, stretching across a vast part of Western and Central Asia. In 539 BCE, Babylon came under his control, but Cyrus did not present himself simply as a destroyer. The famous Cyrus cylinder describes the restoration of temples, cult objects, and displaced communities after the conquest of Babylon. It was written in the traditional language of Babylonian kingship, and also served as political propaganda, designed to make his rule appear legitimate. That distinction matters. The cylinder was not a modern declaration of universal human rights, calling it the first human rights charter projects, a much later idea onto the ancient world. Its real importance is still remarkable. Cyrus understood that a vast empire could be strengthened by respecting local traditions, working with regional elites, and allowing different peoples to maintain parts of their religious and cultural life. His successors expanded that model through provinces, roads, tribute systems, and imperial administration. Ancient traditions remembered him not only as a conqueror, but as an ideal ruler. That reputation crossed cultures that often disagreed about almost everything else. Cyrus ranks first because he combines every category in this ranking: military reach, political intelligence, a durable imperial framework, global influence, and a legacy that survived in both historical memory and later traditions. He was not a modern democrat, and his empire was still an empire. But compared with rulers remembered mainly for victory, Cyrus left a more powerful lesson. Conquering a kingdom can happen in a campaign. Governing many peoples requires a system. Alexander built the faster legend. Cyrus built the stronger model. Sejong changed language. Hammurabi made law visible. Musa connected worlds. Charlemagne revived an imperial idea. And Louis XIV turned culture into state power. Change the criteria and the ranking changes. But that is the real question behind history's greatest kings. Is greatness measured by the land a ruler takes, or by what remains when the ruler is gone?